President Trump's across the pond in the United Kingdom today, out there doing ceremony things with the king and whatnot. The king? Yeah, I guess he is the king now. I'm used to calling him the prince. Anyway, it's it's the norm. This is what the United States president does, but it comes at a very odd time as UK citizens are rising up against the terrible tyranny that has befallen that country. So we figured we should probably talk to Connor about it. Joining me now, the host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube, which I would recommend, Connor Tomlinson. Connor, it's a little odd at a time when the UK citizens are rising up in protest. Mr. President's going over there. What's going on?
Well, I expect, as per usual, Jesse, anytime President Trump visits our rainy little isle which gave birth to the United States, we're sort of like good friendly cousins in that way, Keir Starmer's just going to lie to his face. Last time he was over, he said that they weren't persecuting free speech despite locking up 12,000 people a year, that's at least 30 people a day, for social media posts or things that they say in public that other people are offended about. One of the worst examples in the last year was a guy burning a copy of the Quran outside the Turkish embassy, and he was prosecuted for offending the religious institution of Islam, and the fact that a guy tried to stab him and another guy tried to kick him in the head was used as proof that he had offended Muslims. So he was prosecuted before the guy that tried to stab him for being upset. Keir Starmer, I anticipate, is going to omit the fact that his cabinet in 2017 were calling for Donald Trump to be repelled from the UK. We're calling him a KKK sympathizer. We're calling him a misogynist and a Nazi. The former Foreign Secretary wrote in Time magazine those exact phrases, and the new Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who met President Trump as he stepped off the steps of Air Force One landing in the UK last night, she had in 2017 spoken at a rally saying that President Trump was supporting sexual assault for his grab them by the blank comments, and then stood up in Parliament calling upon Keir Starmer to condemn President Trump for sharing a tweet from British activist Katie Hopkins. Katie Hopkins, who was one of the headliners at the Unite the Kingdom rally last week, where estimates between 500,000 and 1 million peaceful, patriotic British people waved their flags in our own capital city, and by the very act of waving our own flag, offended every single globalist, liberal traitor, and hostile foreign national currently settled in our country. If they don't like our flag being waved in our capital city, they should go elsewhere.
Okay, I want to actually talk about that rally, Connor. I just saw video, right? I couldn't make it, but it looked enormous. You said 500,000 to 1 million people. Is this one of these one-off things where now everybody goes back home? I can't imagine the anger has subsided. Where does it go from here?
So I think this is the fourth rally overall that they have planned, and this is the largest because this is the most recent one since Tommy Robinson was released from prison. He was held in solitary confinement for the best part of a year for playing a film that had been ruled libelous. So thanks to the laws in my country, I can't talk any further about that. Never mind. But despite the media trying to make Mr. Robinson a bogeyman for the last decade or more, 800,000 to 1 million people turned out on the streets, largely peacefully. I think there were 8 arrests overall. There were actually more arrests on the Stand Up to Racism side, the Refugees Welcome side, which is sponsored by the Socialist Workers' Party that gets money from government unions, by the way. So there were more arrests on that side, fighting police, than there were among the much larger patriotic British crowd. And what was most interesting, Jesse, is that after Elon Musk addressed the crowd, after Tommy Robinson hosted the rally, and it was largely peaceful, Nigel Farage gave a press conference the following day. And Nigel Farage has his differences with Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson. They haven't been the kindest to one another in the past. And when the press kept calling on him to denounce Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson, as he had before, much like President Trump did in the days following Charlie Kirk's assassination, he didn't turn around and say, "No, there are radicals on the right that I need to distance myself from." He turned around and said that the people that were marching were largely peaceful and patriotic because they are his own voters, and instead, the real villains in Britain are the people who make women feel unsafe in London by importing foreign men that are 20 times more likely to commit sex offences than British men. The people that enable the pro-Hamas marches that have gone through our capital city every weekend and Wednesday since October 7th, and have launched fireworks at police horses but haven't been cracked down on because our demented Mayor Sadiq Khan, who, by the way, was a lawyer for one of the only surviving 9/11 terrorists, has decided that this is just absolutely tickety-boo. So I think that this march will continue to snowball. I think it will continue to be peaceful, continue to gain ground, and I think what it shows is that the moral legitimacy lies within the silent majority, that this is our country, that politicians should represent our interests, and that we, despite being demonized as far-right, racist, fascists, and Nazis, are no such thing.
Connor, can you help us understand? It's Americans don't understand the political system in the UK. We understand very little of it. Can you help me understand if it's possible to take back power for people who think and talk like you do? Because it seems like for the longest time, from the outside looking in, that there's been an attempt to do so and it always ends up falling flat. Is it possible?
So the Brexit referendum in 2016 is probably the most notable example because it came about, 5 or 6 months before Trump was elected. The twin shocks of populism at the time. And Brexit was betrayed by Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party, who, after they were elected in 2019 to get Brexit done, spent the next 4 years importing over 4 million immigrants to our country. To put that in perspective, Jesse, our country is the size of New York State. So we have the same level of legal migration that the whole of the United States of America does in a country the size of New York State. That includes 1 million Indians over the course of 4 years. If 1 million Indians were to solve all of our problems, then India wouldn't have any problems. Unfortunately, it has many, and turns out they cause a lot of problems when they come to the UK. Now, every single election and referendum since 1974, the British public have voted for lower migration, and they've always received more. And so, at the last election, people decided to punish the Conservatives. Most people did not vote, and instead, lots of people, 4 million of them, voted for Reform UK, Nigel Farage's new party. Now, in the last year, they have wavered and wobbled on whether or not they'll commit to mass deportations and have been quite soft on the problem of Islam. However, they have gotten a lot further recently. They want to do extradition deals for foreign criminals with Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. They want to do mass deportations for all illegal migrants, and they want net legal emigration, so more people leaving than coming in. That's very encouraging. The only problem is, as Elon Musk pointed out at the rally, we have a pretty disastrous 4 years ahead of us because Keir Starmer's Labour government, despite winning fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019, has a massive majority. And even though Keir Starmer is pretty much on the brink of being voted out by his own party for appointing Jeffrey Epstein's best friend, Peter Mandelson, the ambassador to the United States, your great country, it's unlikely Labour themselves will be gotten rid of before 2029. Unless the entire economy collapses, they're forced to go for a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, and the polls are so bad that they might as well cut their losses and stop hemorrhaging votes to Jeremy Corbyn's Islamic Party, then it's unlikely they're going to call an early election. So we have got 4 more painful years to wait until we can change our government around. In that time, we've still got mass migration, we've still got the economy being run by a bunch of doctrinaire Marxists, and we've still got massive crime, gaslighting, and people being thrown in prison for social media posts.
God have mercy. Hold on. The Islamic Party? What did you say?
Oh, yes. So Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of Labour, who was kicked out of Keir Starmer's party for anti-Semitism, who had called Hezbollah and Hamas our friends and cozied up to the IRA, decided to found a new party with a bunch of MPs that were kicked out of the Labour Party for being too radical on things like socialist policies and Palestine, and he has formed his alliance with 4 independent Muslim MPs who were elected in largely Muslim areas entirely on a pro-Palestine ticket. These include like Ayub Khan and Shokat Adam. So this party represents Islamic interests. One of the members of parliament has stood up and defended cousin marriage in parliament. It's madness that we're even at this point. And more than likely, they are going to get probably double-digit seats in the next parliament because there are whole areas of this country, Jesse, where the English do not live at all. They are Muslim enclaves. Ed Hussein, in his book in 2021, Among the Mosques, described these areas where if you are a white Briton and you walk down the wrong street, you will be jumped by a group of Pakistani men who will beat you up for the colour of your skin. And the imams that the government pays to be moderates blame British girls for the rape gang scandal, which I'm sure Americans are aware of thanks to the work of Elon Musk and X, but up to 1 million girls over the last 50 years in over 50 towns and cities across Britain have been raped, trafficked, abused, and even murdered by largely Pakistani Muslim men. And police officers were members of the gangs. Lords in the House of Lords were part of the rapes. Members of parliament, politicians, journalists, local councillors, social workers all covered it up, and not a single person has been deported for it, and not a single person has lost their job over the cover-up. And Labour had to be dragged kicking and screaming to a national inquiry, and now the person overseeing the national inquiry is the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, a Pakistani Muslim who supported a definition of Islamophobia that said conversations about the grooming gangs themselves are racist.
God have mercy. Connor, you wrote a wonderful piece for Courage Media about Charlie Kirk saying he needs to be MAGA's last martyr. What do you mean?
So I had the pleasure of meeting Charlie when he came over to the UK last May, and I don't know him nearly as well as obviously his friends and family. However, he really cared about our country, and he sat down and discussed the plight of Lucy Connolly, the 40-year-old mother who was locked up by Keir Starmer for 31 months for an imprudent tweet that she deleted. Meanwhile, sex offenders get no jail time and walk free. And he asked me to provide him some notes for that, and he was interviewed about it on GB News and did his debates at Oxford and Cambridge. And when we parted, I joked it's always nice to sit across from a future US president, because I think pretty much everyone knows, everyone that interacted with Charlie, they've all got a good story about him, and they knew that he was destined for greatness. And America has not just lost an excellent political campaigner and a future president and a true patriot, but of course, his wife's lost her husband, his friends have lost a friend, and his children have lost their father. And this was entirely preventable. If the Open Society Foundation that funds these leftist activist NGOs, that foments violence in America's cities, that pays permissive DAs to unleash violent criminals and let them off with a slap on the wrist on cashless bail, if social media companies weren't allowed to censor conservatives while allowing trans shooters like Dylan Butler of Iowa last year to plan his shooting on Discord and then Discord deny it. If all of these things weren't allowed, then Charlie Kirk would still be alive today. Charlie tweeted in, I think it was 2023, that if we continue to fight with one hand behind our back, if we continue to respond with only speech to our enemies who want us dead, then we will end up losing. And I think we need to respect his legacy. We need to go after, as J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller have competently promised, the NGO industrial complex that funds trans Antifa leftist terror. They need to be shut down. No more patriots need to die. No more fathers need to be taken away from their children. No more husbands away from their wives. Charlie Kirk was one of us. And even over in Britain, all of my friends and cohorts and members of Gen Z on the right looked at it, and we found it even more impactful than President Trump's near-miss assassination. Because President Trump almost getting shot was a heart-stopping moment, and it was the president. But Charlie Kirk was one of us, and it could be any of us next.
You guys, before I let you go, do you guys struggle with this tranny terror network over there, or is it just the Islamists?
It's both. So, because we don't have a large, widespread gun culture, especially the gun-free zones that, of course, they can then enter and shoot defenseless children, we haven't had any school shooters. But we have had a lot of transgender threats of violence. We've had a lot of graffiti, a lot of threats against people's life, like J.K. Rowling and Kathleen Stock and Graham Linehan, who was just arrested, funnily enough, landing back in the UK from Arizona. So this is state-sponsored. And by the way, all of the triumphalism about the UK banning puberty blockers, the health secretary who did this was a former member of Stonewall. He was in a secret meeting recently saying that he was actually lamenting the fact that he was banning it. And in less than 2 years' time, this will come up for review. And they are currently experimenting on children with puberty blockers still in the UK in clinical trials with no cap. So this is still going on in the UK, and we need to be vigilant about it.
Yeah. Connor, brother, thank you, man. Appreciate you. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.